to a nest of players in the air. It gets to the back.
Came to Mason Wood. Higgins got it to McDonald. Gives it off to Ahern. Floats it to Goldstein. Through the corridor.
Chip kick, not great. Higgins got to chase it down. He's taking it now. Handball, Ben Brown. He's in the back pocket. He kicks off the neck.
The goal's going to be kicked by Zeeble and the Kangaroos at the front with 20 seconds left.
Seconds remaining. McLean to get the clearance. They need a mark for McDonald. Luke McDonald marks.
And the Kangaroos, who have been the fairy tale story of 2018, they come up with a massive result.
And they were challenged, and when it had to be done, they found the answer and they win by 2 points, and they're back inside the 8.
Close Shave, brought to you by Gillette, with Flexball technology for our closest shave.
Well, that'll get the heart rate going. The perfect sense of timing because you're in anyway. Brad Scott deputising for Chris. Welcome.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Richo.
It was your turn last week, so we're sharing it around. Richo, nice to see you.
You good to be here, Ed?
Good on you, boys. Hey, Scotty, mate, I'd much rather see you going, yeah, than that one. Mate, how good is that?
Oh, it's an amazing feeling, probably because we felt that the Bulldogs had done enough to win by that stage. So they were fantastic all night, and we've been on the end of some of those losses, particularly last year, some close losses, which we learned a lot from. But it was certainly nice to be on the other side for a change.
So you lost 5-1 kickers between round 2 and round 16 last year. Then you won one in round 19 and you've won your 2 this year. So we love the art of the close finish. We've labbed it up. You tell us what went right from the kick to restart play.
Yeah, I think there's a fair bit here. I mean, you've got to roll the dice to a certain extent. I mean, the first thing is the Bulldogs have got numbers behind the ball, so just kicking it straight back to them ices the game. So even that handball there from Paul Ahern, it's an underrated skill in the modern game, handball. That handball Todd Goldstein didn't have to break stride, and the forwards played their part. I mean, you can't coach that from Ben Brown. That's just great footy IQ, and he's an incredibly smart player. And Jack Zeeble was in the right place at the right time.
And how much time, so you alluded to this in the press conference, how much time do you actually dedicate to trying to simulate something like that?
A lot of time, probably more so on the defending part of it, when you're actually in front, how you defend a lead. But then the flip side to that is you're actually able to practice the other side with the other guys who are trying to score. So, we try and make it as game-like as possible at training, and we spend a lot of time on it for, I think at that stage there was 46 seconds left on the clock when Scott Thompson had the ball. So we spent a lot of time on it, but clearly it's important. And you look at that passage of play from Luke McDonald's clean take below his knees to Paul Ahern's handball, everything had to go right. And I feel for the Bulldogs because they did a lot right, but as I said, we're on the end of a few of those and it's nice to win one.
Ben Brown, though, the dexterity to be able to hit it with the outside of the boot, going the wrong way, Dacos-like from the pocket, if you like, but to kick it straight. Now, Flex will try that and he'll kick it over the fence. Yeah. It was just beautiful the way he did it. But I loved the poise. He knew exactly what he was trying to do, and then he executed it under pressure. That's football in its essence to me. Yeah,
it is, and I describe it as footy IQ because it's knowing that if he takes possession of the ball, he's going to get tackled immediately, and that chain of play will be over. So he's an incredibly smart player. He's kicked a lot of goals at ground level, which is rare for a 200 centimetre forward. But we love him for his contested marking and his straight kicking. But I think his footy IQ is underrated. How
much of it, Richo, is in the lap of the gods at those moments? So you've had 2 this year, one against the Giants where the play did open up and then, there's this much in it was Carlisle goes for the mark, and then at the stop play where you get exactly what you're constructing.
When you're behind, you're definitely rolling the dice, so you're much more aggressive and you do need a bit of luck there. The other team are obviously trying to close you down and stop you, and so it could quite easily go the other way. You're not going to get the result if you haven't done the work. Most of our work, Scotty, I'm not sure whether you're any different, would be done in pre-season, and then you tend to top up, based on circumstance and situation. But yeah, it's certainly a part of the game. Stoppage is not dissimilar, where you get the opportunity to get something organised, and it's incredibly satisfying when the players, because they're the ones that have to pull it off. It happens so quickly. So Scotty's gone from trying to win, and within a matter of seconds, he's now trying to save the game, because the situation changes. You go from euphoria to, and I could see your emotion in the box, screaming to make sure you then got your defensive structure right.
I won't tell you what I said.
It's got. It must be good though when you look up with that moments to go, and the three blokes who are going to be in the play are Higgins and Brown and Zeeble. You know that Zeeble's going to hit him with a grandstand's not going to stop him. You've got, as I said, the bloke like Brown who's playing such good football, but Higgins he was in two parts of that chain. Yeah. And set it up beautifully.
Yeah, he was incredible. I mean, the Bulldogs put a lot of time into him in the first half, and he's an incredibly resilient player and just such a smart player, and he's able to stay in the moment really well. And he got us back in the game there in that third quarter. Probably played in the second half one of the best halves of footy I've seen from a midfielder this year. And he's when the ball's in his hands, we generally keep it. He just makes such great decisions.
And he's an interesting player. He's got a really good life outside footy, I understand. He's got a really good business with his father and in property developing and building and things. So he's a two-dimensional player, as far as a football player is concerned. He has the business side of his life as well.
He's a very complete person. He really treats his life in a sense like a business. He's got all aspects of his life mapped out. He's an unbelievable role model for the rest of our team, and as good as he's been on field for us over a number of years, I think he's even been more important off field. He's an integral part of our leadership group and just a fantastic role model for all our young players.
He's been spoken about as a potential Brownlow medalist now too, which I can remember in his early days he was flagged as that. Is he worthy of that discussion?
Well, I think it's probably for others to judge. All I can say is that he's a very complete player. He's a goal kicker. You look at the sort of players that come into the calculations for a Brownlow that attract the umpire's attention. I mean, he's around the contest, he gets forward, he kicks goals. His defensive work's underrated, but I don't think the umpires pay too much attention to that generally. But no, he'd be. He's got all the capabilities. And
he's a midfielder and he's got blonde hair. There you go.
Yeah. And he'd be a very worthy winner in my humble opinion.
You must be incredibly pleased with your senior players. You're a much younger group now. You've made a lot of decisions with your list over the last couple of years, but blokes like Higgins and Cunnington and Tarrant and Thompson, and you've been public on a few. So Wadey, he's going to have at age 33, he's going to be his best year. You were quite challenging of Goldstein publicly, but in an uplifting sort of way. Has that been deliberate because you've moved on and changed the list that we need you blokes to be strong? Or
yeah, I think there's definitely an onus on leaders to show the way, and then the first way you do that is through your actions and your performance on field. I mean, we're really strong in our leaders performing. I mean, there's a lot to leadership, but number one is lead by your actions. And I often say to our guys that, whether you like it or not, our leaders are held to a higher account than everyone else. And we tend to think that if we get our leaders to do the job, it's pretty easy for everyone else to follow. And Jared Waite's a classic example of that. He's been absolutely fantastic for us, injured at the moment. But I think if you hold those leaders to a higher account, get them to lead the way, particularly in the areas of the game that maybe young players don't rate, the defensive side of the game. I mean, Wadey's gone from, everyone knows what he can do offensively, but he's an elite defensive player now as well. So, that's shown the way for anyone who wants to play in our forward half, that you've got to play like Jared Waite defensively.
And suddenly the Marshmallow Cup becomes pretty significant again this week against the Bombers. Yeah,
it's always a great game, regardless of ladder position. And, way back to the Sheeds incident, I suppose you call it. But the supporters love this game, I know, from both clubs. So we're hoping for a massive crowd, and the players are really looking forward to it.
We've spoken in this forum a few times around when you give a decent spray. Luke Beveridge chose to in the aftermath of this game. It was overheard in the rooms. It was a good old burst. I don't think there's actually a lot of heartburn to this story. There was media in the Bulldogs rooms waiting to conduct their interviews. What was being said was echoing around. It was the essence of it was reported, but none of the specifics. There was no breaching of who was named and what was being said, just that a burst was being given. Are you ever mindful of, when you're in the full throttle of coaching, that there are people watching and listening?
No, not in that moment, personally. I've, in fact, spoke to my media guy on the way in to talk about the show, and we spoke about this, and I just need him to remind me from time to time, depending on the situation. The reality is, you're usually in quite an emotional stage, either victory or loss. It's quite a sensitive time. We've mentioned here also on the show that you're generally pretty calculated as a coach. If you're going to go in and give an individual or a group a real touch up verbally, it's because you think it's the right thing to do, not just based on emotion. But no, it's an interesting one. That I certainly would want to know as a coach that the media are in there. But we all know the landscape now that we need to open ourselves up to give the media the opportunity to be involved.
Should it have been reported verbatim?
Not verbatim. So I think the right thing's been done. This is what happened.
The dog always bites, the gun's always loaded, and the microphone's always on.
Yeah.
Live by those three and you get through life pretty well. I got through a couple of them. I've failed a few times every now and again. But on that one, I mean, let's be honest, every change room now has more cameras in it than what we've got here in the studio, not to mention these cameras, which are everywhere. You're out in the middle of the MCG, you want to give somebody a burst, there's going to be effects mics everywhere. Do you take it home and do it on Monday or take it somewhere else? Is the day of giving the spray now with so many media around the place, is that just a recipe for disaster, or do you expect it to be picked up and have it reported if it's picked up in the way this was? Because they could hear them in the next suburb, couldn't they? Jared,
they could hear them down the corridor, not just in the room.
I think the media scrutiny and some would call it an invasion of privacy, but I think the access that the media get now is really important for the fans. And I think we want to open the game up so that the fans get some sort of behind-the-scenes access. But part of the art of coaching is picking your moment. And I certainly won't speak for Bevo, but if you think that this is a moment that's too good to pass up to get your message across or to make an impact, then you've got to make that calculated decision as to whether you take it. And that's the art of it. And I know that a number of times I've been in the situation where it's just, you'd probably prefer to wait, but the moment's too good to pass up.
The Jeremy Cameron, Harris Andrews, I'm totally in your hands as to whether you want to pass any comment. Is that an action that the game doesn't tolerate? You can pass here if you like.
No, that's where it's ended up. I've always mentioned intent. That's a really difficult one when a forward has launched at the ball and looking to mark the ball, and all of a sudden someone with enormous courage, Andrews, comes back with the flight of footy. There's going to be a collision. That's inevitable. And it's really difficult for the forward. It looks awkward, it looks clumsy. I can understand, given how strong we are in terms of protecting players and looking after the head, that there'll be some sort of sanction. But it's a really difficult one. We had Tim Membry do exactly the same thing last year. He was able to just tuck up a little bit more. He got 2 weeks. Even then, I thought, gee, he's a bit stiff there, but that's a big knock, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. So, and I don't want this to be construed in any way as victim blaming, because I don't think Harris Andrews carries anything for this. So I want to ask you about the philosophy of going back with the flight of the ball and what you encourage, what's non-negotiable, and what you might in fact discourage, because it is fundamentally dangerous in some instances.
It is. We laud players who keep their eyes on the ball in the contest, but I think the flaw in that at the moment is that we pillory players who have a look, and I encourage our players to look before you leap. I mean, look before you go back with the flight. There's no problem when the ball's in the air having a quick look to see what's ahead of you before you go. I know maybe the boys on the couch can ask Jonathan Brown, because I'll never forget Lee Matthews telling him to stop. Just stop going back with the flight, because he was concerned he was not only going to kill himself, but he was going to kill Daniel Bradshaw as well. The amount of times he ran back into our own players. And
it did end his career.
Yeah, it did. Some sickening head knocks. So the courage is fantastic, but there's no shame in looking before you make the decision to go, if you've got time. Now, sometimes you just don't have time. But, there's certainly the reckless back with the flight. We've seen some great examples, Rewalt, Brown over the journey, but that was a sickening clash. And the thing about Jeremy Cameron that I think everyone loves about him is he loves the physical side of the game, and it just looked to me that he was going to make physical contact no matter what, and probably got himself into a position where he couldn't pull out of it. So you want the physical side of the game, but we just can't have players in that situation that Harris Andrews is in now.
It's horrible. What do you coach around going back with the flight?
No, our technique is to look, but we want blokes to go. We want blokes to be prepared to sacrifice. I mean, Gavin Brown is a bloke that I played with that was quite inspirational. Obviously, Jonathan Brown, not dissimilar. Jimmy Webster and Geary do it for us, and it's it's something that we value.
The thing is, though, we laud it when it happens and it comes off, and then we hang our heads when it doesn't come off.
We do.
The reason why we believe it's so courageous is because it takes courage and the danger is enormous. I look back on Tom Lonergan. I reckon he, I don't think I'm stretching it too far to say he might have lost a kidney because the week before one of his teammates got absolutely slaughtered by the media for having a look. And as a result of that, he put himself in a position where he probably shouldn't have. He probably should have turned around and maybe been front and square rather than going back with the ball and getting cleaned up. Now, I don't know what's the answer to that. You know, we want blokes to be going all the time, don't we? When I look at the women's game sometimes and God almighty, what's going on there? They've thrown themselves in too recklessly. You know, I saw a junior football game recently where I said to a kid, "What are you going in like that for?" And he said, "Oh, I've got to keep my head over the ball." I said, Daryl Baldock said, never put your head where you can stick your backside. You know, we've got to teach people how to protect themselves. So sometimes...
There is no doubt to that, Ed. The technique part of it's critical, and you know, we want to teach kids how to do it. And someone... I admired watching Glenn Archer go back with a flight of the ball, not only for his courage, but for his technique in how he did it. He was able to protect himself and very rarely got hurt, funnily enough, because he had a great technique to do it. But going back blindly and opening yourself up to contact, you know, I think we can work on that with our juniors and particularly our female footballers.